We are definitely going to get into the flooring discussion here in just a second, but I want to take care of some housekeeping first. Hopefully I can just fly through these stats for you and give a little bit of my opinion. Right now, the average mortgage rate for a 30-year fixed FHA is 5.63. Remember, on average over the last 40-something years, the average was 7.42%. So we are actually below average for mortgage rates, like literally right now. And that is a good thing. I'm not convinced that we're going to get back down to, the 2s and the 3s anytime soon. So if you are a buyer, this might be the time for you to take serious consideration. Now, one thing that you do want to keep an eye out for is the days on market. And we are currently, as of December of 2025, it's January 9th when I'm filming this right now. December of 25, Tarrant County was at 40 days on market for the average for a listing before it sold. And December of 2024, the average days on market was 39. So you can see that's not a huge change, but of note, by May of 2025, the average days on market in Tarrant County, that had gotten down to 23. So it's typical to see the seasonal upticks. So you have the holiday season and it's wintertime, not a whole lot of people are looking at homes. And then when you get down toward the spring, you start seeing the lower days on market. So lower days on market means that more people are interested. So you're gonna have more competition, which is why I said in the beginning that this, especially with these mortgage rates, could be a good time for buyers to get in, because the people who are actually selling right now are probably actually motivated to sell. And so you're doing both one another a favor by getting active. I want to talk about month supply because in my opinion, and again, it's just my opinion, month supply kind of talks about the stability of prices a little bit. We are down to, in Tarrant County as of December, 3-month supply. And if you look at Tarrant County in December of 2022, we were at 2.3 months of supply, which means that inventory was moving rather quickly, and that represents a bit of a seller's market. It's a little bit more even. You actually do want to look for around a 3-month supply marker. So we are in that right now. If we look at July of 2025, Tarrant County was up to 4.2 months of supply, and the US was at 5.7 months of supply, which in my mind kind of speaks to a very stagnant market. So those are the updates. Sorry about that. I went into like 3 minutes. Let's talk about flooring. In the 1900s, kind of through the 1940s, not a lot was changing in terms of the technology and the manufacturing process for homes. We had a lot of innovation going on for the war efforts, World War II and also World War I. We'll see that come up in the flooring types that we talk about in the future. But 1900s through 1940s, solid wood flooring, it was all the rage. Typical in colonial revival craftsmen's, Tudor revival, early farmhouses, and I would say kind of like later on in high-end contemporary homes, popular in the Northeast, Midwest. And some of the pros to solid hardwoods, you got to think it's a panel of hardwood. It's that incredibly durable, lasts a super long time. And I'm not talking like last 5 years, 10 years. I'm talking about 50 years, in some cases all the way up to 100 years. And did you have to maintain it? You have to resurface it, because as the surface gets scratched or stained or discolored, then you're gonna have to go through and re-scrape those, re-smooth those, or refinish it. But because you had so much thick wood to work with, you could do that for a very long time. And if you really took care of them, you weren't scraping the furniture across when you moved, or you used rugs in high traffic areas, those floors would last super, super long, extremely durable, and in my opinion, very good looking. The cons would have been the expensive upfront costs. They were susceptible to moisture, so if you let moisture set on any piece of wood, natural wood, you're going to start to get a little bit of bowing and whatnot. Not necessarily good, so you do have to, mop that up rather quickly. Not necessarily the same case for like for a tile or something, but if you're into the wood look and you can put up with the fact that you have to put some, rugs down and mop quickly, relatively quickly compared to some of the other stuff that comes on later, then hardwoods, solid hardwoods, super, super good choice. And one other thing is, I would say they were noisy without rugs, but also think about the time frame that those wood floors were popular. Now, the squeaking, you're never truly going to get rid of. If you have a panel that's loose, it's going to squeak. But if you think about the shoes that people are wearing, if you're wearing more formal shoes with, hardened heels or soles or whatever, you're going to have a little bit of that, clip clop as somebody's walking. So it is going to be a little louder. But we all wear like sneakers and slippers in the house, so the acoustic impact of hardwood floors is going to be a little bit less. So hardwood floors were kind of considered the default for middle and upper class homes in the time frame that I mentioned. I think it's interesting because if you look back at leather seats in cars, leather seats were considered for the workers, and cloth seats were the luxury because cloth didn't get searingly hot in the summer and freezing cold in the winter. They always kind of maintained that neutral temperature. So when you got in, it was nice. It was soft. You didn't have to warm it up or cool it down in order for your skin or your clothing to be comfortable sitting on top of it. And so people's outlook on materials change over time, even though the actual functionality of the materials don't. So that's one of those things where human psychology comes in and starts to, put associations with different manufacturing processes in both cars and houses, which I think is actually quite interesting. The next one up is linoleum and basically sheet vinyl. Now, here's the big difference. If you've ever heard the word linoleum and thought to yourself, that kind of sounds like a mix between the words linseed and oil. Maybe not a whole lot of people do that, but I thought about that. But linoleum is actually a linseed oil based product. So it's linseed oil, cork dust, and they used to use a burlap backing. And so linseed plus oil, linoleum, is where you got the name for that paneling. Later on, they started to use petrol chemicals for that, and that's how you got the vinyl or PVC based synthetic sheets. So vinyl flooring was basically a replacement for linoleum, but aesthetically and functionally they kind of served the same purpose. Now, these were popular in bungalows, particularly the kitchens, Cape Cods, ranch houses, mid-century modern, and it was kind of like a nationwide kind of thing, and it lasted all the way from like the 1920s through the 1960s, and I want to say maybe the 1950s was the high point of popularity for linoleum. And some of the pros were easy to install, water resistant, easy to clean. You got those smooth surfaces, and you can wipe away stains quite quickly, especially when you get into, the vinyl sheets, because things just kind of tend to roll off of plastic. So, it was very functional, which is why it stayed very popular. So you have solid hardwood floors kind of existing and thriving at the same time as linoleum and vinyl sheets. One was considered a little bit more high end, and the other one was considered a little bit more for the masses. And also, linoleum and vinyl were considered to be pretty sanitary. And we are going to see a little bit more about people's concerns with, healthcare and in particular respiratory effects of flooring a little bit later on. So actually, one of those things is going to be wall-to-wall carpeting, which was popular from the 1950s to the 1990s. Now, notice, people don't just stop, bam, I'm not using linoleum anymore, I'm only using carpet. It's more of a spectrum, it's more of a gradient, and you're going to see, houses, from the 50s that still had linoleum and vinyl sheets. And then you're going to start to see some of them start to change. And by the time the 80s and the 90s came about, you have got wall-to-wall carpeting. And that was a selling point, wall-to-wall carpeting. And, people kind of automatically gravitate towards things that are new. And so it started to be associated really with luxury. So wall-to-wall carpeting, in the beginning they used wool, then they switched to polyester. Just like I said, post-war synthetics was a big thing. A lot of chemical manufacturing processes were accelerated and improved because of the need for mass production in World War II. And when those factories started to stand down, the war effort, they needed a way to use those factories for civilian use, for non-war use, because they didn't want to just shut those down. So that's where you get the introduction of a lot of petrochemical manufactured goods that are, quite frankly, still with us today. Popular in ranch houses, split levels, suburban colonials, and late 20th century contemporary homes. I don't know, think the Brady Bunch house, think, that kind of stuff. The houses that I think currently people don't see as particularly charming, I kind of like them. I think 80s houses were made really well, and they were made on top of the existing topography. So if there's some hills in your neighborhood, you will notice that a lot of the homes that were made in the 80s and prior were built on top of the topography, versus now, when you look at new subdivisions, you see that they have leveled the ground, and it's a little bit more, cookie cutter. It allows for a cheaper manufacturing process, so you can get a lot more home for the money when you just go through and level the subdivision. But you miss out on a little bit of that charm that you get when the home is actually built and integrated into the topography. See there, I've gone away from flooring and I'm going into topography, completely different video. Let's get back to flooring. So, some of the pros, warm and quiet and soft underfoot, and initially inexpensive compared to the initial costs of a solid hardwood floor. Cons: stains easily. You spill some Kool-Aid or whatever, popular drink in the 80s and 90s, and that's a stain. You didn't have that problem with linoleum, with vinyl, with hardwoods, and, a lot of bit of a shorter lifespan. So you start to get stains in the carpet that just start to raise up no matter how often you clean it. Carpeting starts to look dingy and whatnot. And so say you have a 5 or 10 year life for carpet. Yeah, it's cheap, but if you have to install it over and over again, it starts to become less cheap. Carpet is there. It is there to stay. So whatever gets in there, dust mites or whatever, dust, that is staying. Thankfully, the vacuum technology became better, which meant that you could lift some of the dust and whatnot out of the carpet. Ceramic and porcelain tiles, now those did exist in the 1920s as a kind of a standard, manufacturing process, part of a standard home construction process. But they were in very particular homes because aesthetically they kind of came with that kind of home, kind of like, I don't know, resonated with that style home. So the kind of homes were Spanish colonial revivals, Mediterranean, Southwestern Pueblo revival, and some contemporary and modern homes. And a lot of homes that, maybe like California, Arizona, Texas, maybe Florida, even if they didn't have tiles all the way through the home, they did use it in the kitchens. Durable, stain resistant, water resistant, a huge variety of design that you can do. And I can tell you that even in the home that I live in, while there are some different flooring types, there is tile in the kitchen and tile in the bathroom. And I do very much appreciate that because it's very hygienic and very hard wearing. In my opinion, you don't really want carpet in the kitchen or the bathroom. The cons, very cold underfoot, so you got to wear slippers, and very I would say difficult to install because when you've got to cut it, you've got to have special cutting tools to make sure that you can put these things in the corners and whatnot. And then you do have to do some grout maintenance, otherwise the grout can get a little bit manky. So yeah, it's not a put it down and forget about it, but it is very functional where they have it. So that brings me to laminate and engineered woods. Those started to really gain popularity toward the tail end of the 90s, and it is really popular now because you get the benefits of a wood look, but it's less expensive to install, less expensive to acquire, and you kind of get the aesthetics. Now, does it look and feel as authentic as a true solid hardwood? In my opinion, no. I've stood on solid hardwood floors. I have walked through, and there is a little bit more of a rustic, earthy vibe, a warmer vibe that you get from real hardwoods. If you're not really that concerned, they do kind of serve the same purpose. Now, I do want to talk about kind of like the bonus thing, shag carpeting. And shag carpeting is actually super, super interesting. I could probably do an entire video about shag carpeting, but all right. Shag carpeting came about, I think it was like the late 60s, early 70s. You kind of associate it with like kind of I don't want to say the hippie lifestyle, but kind of like that relaxed lifestyle. Fashion trends were getting more relaxed. Men were migrating away from suits and into jeans and t-shirts. Women were kind of doing the same thing, migrating away from, dresses and the more formal kind of stuff into jeans and whatnot. And what that allowed people to do was just kind of like literally get closer to the ground, like lounging, put some pillows on the ground, and it was like socially acceptable to sit on the floor and just kind of hang out. And so hardwood floors weren't very comfortable, rugs weren't very comfortable, carpet, that's pretty comfortable. But what's even better, like long shaggy shag carpet. But drawback, health concerns. A lot of stuff can get trapped in shag carpet. Dust mites, like I mentioned, dust itself, stains, all that kind of stuff. Shag carpets kind of got associated with poor health because it literally reduced the air quality in your house. And remember, I said with the original carpeting, you could vacuum it and you could get a lot of that stuff up. If you've ever tried to vacuum a shag carpet, it doesn't end well. The vacuum cleaner does not like that. So then you end up with a carpet that is just full of crud. And so that basically spelled the end of shag carpets. People couldn't really take it anymore. Now there are kind of like shag rugs, like a longer pile rug, but that's because you can still pick that up, take it outside, beat it, get, as much of the dust out as you can. What is the takeaway? What is the takeaway? The takeaway is this. And instead of just focusing on the flooring that is brand new, it actually behooves you to know about the flooring and know which flooring is going to fit your lifestyle. Just like I mentioned in the intro, I love turbo cars. I like hot hatchbacks from the 80s, and I love turbo lag. Turbo lag annoys the crap out of some people, but for me, I like it. And that's the ultimate takeaway. Look for stuff that you like, that resonates with you, that fits your purpose, your outlook, your aesthetics, your timelines, and go for that, because I think that you're going to be a lot happier with that decision versus just going with what's new. All right. I've been Dalton. This has been The Roof List, and you have been great. Thanks for watching. I'm out.